We're here today with Dr. Mark Gardiner from Queen's University Belfast. Mark, you delivered a paper at the Celtic Fringe Festival. Can you give us a brief summary of what the main points of it were?
Well, I think the main points that I was making was that really we need to look at Northwest Ireland in the broader sense of what was going on in the North Atlantic and the way in which this area was being sucked into a wider European trading system during the course of the 15th and particularly the 16th centuries. And that although there were very few towns in this area, there were some towns, but there was still a lot of trade taking place on a seasonal basis.
Yes. One of the many interesting aspects to your paper was the very underdeveloped notion of cartography and map making, and particularly along the western coast of Ireland. What are the implications of that for trade at that point?
Well, I think really it represents how little understanding there was of trade. And one of the slides I showed was a map. It's a fairly well-known map, but it's still very informative. And I think there's a lot of work that can still be done on it. It was drawn up by Lawrence Noel in 1560. And it shows how little understanding there was of this area. Whereas much of the coastline of Ireland was very accurately depicted, by the time it comes to the northwest, they're just drawing on more or less straight lines and dotting on a few islands, putting on a few place names, and that's it. They really don't know what's going on around here.
And why do you think that was the case?
This is an area which is remote from English. It's outside any English control. It's remote from trade. It's remote from the Spanish, who are coming up from the southwest, of course. It really is at the periphery of these trading systems, and so people just are not getting up here, both for political reasons and also for economic reasons.
Yeah, in your paper also, you discussed the construction of kind of round towers at points of entry into havens or into bays and harbours, and that tolls were actually extracted on shippers. What sort of income, do we have any ideas, was generated from that?
Well, we don't know, but clearly the Irish lords were very much involved in the trading system, and one of the ways in which they gained prestige was by possessing wine. And one of the things, what they were trading from their tower houses was the salmon, was other fish, in return for wine. It was very much an exchange system. You're bartering goods for one sort of good for another sort of goods, and almost certainly they were taking tolls from the ships that were anchored in any case. So they were obtaining these high status goods, these prestige goods, but that wasn't the only things that were being traded, but the details of these other traded goods which the fishermen must have been receiving, we really don't know. We simply haven't got the records to give us any indication, and the archaeology isn't really very helpful also, or certainly the archaeology hasn't been done to give us an idea of the other sorts of traded items.
Yes, I think in your paper you mentioned the emergence of a mercantile class, particularly in places like Bristol and other parts of England. Why do you think that sort of class, that petit bourgeois, didn't emerge in the west of Ireland at that time?
Well, I think it was emerging, but I think the level of merchants, the level of trade, the quantity of trade that was taking place was barely sufficient to allow that class to develop on a full-time basis. But there were merchants in Sligo, for example. There were almost certainly merchants in Donegal. They were emerging, but it was a long, slow process. And really, we were looking at it in the state of development during the course of the 16th century. And then, of course, we get the 9 Years' War, and in many ways the English and the subsequent plantations of the English change everything, and that's a different story. It doesn't come. The Irish story doesn't really come to fruition.
And do you think, in terms of the theme of the symposium today, the Celtic Fringe and the Armada, do you think that the absence of a detailed mapping of the northwest coast in any way, shape, or form contributed to the disorientation of the Armada?
Well, I think that's absolutely the case, that the poor Spanish were coming upon a coastline where they simply couldn't know about the geography of it. They couldn't know about the tides, they couldn't know about the bays. Even the Spanish fishermen who had been coming up the west coast of Ireland were not generally coming this far north. They did not know this part of Ireland, so they simply hadn't got the knowledge. So they were entering really effectively uncharted, literally uncharted waters. And so in the state that they were in, they were having to navigate and manage in the winds and the tides in a totally unknown area. It was very hard for them indeed.
Well, thank you very much for your contributions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.